And our second main topic today gets submitted to us by Aidan, who writes, "Hey, John and crew. I know you put out your out-of-theater reaction for Eternals, but the review embargo has now been lifted as of Sunday." Yes, it was lifted on Sunday. I was wondering if what your spoiler-free thoughts on the movie are. Did it live up to your expectations? All right. Thanks a lot so much, man, for sending in the question. And yes, Eternals, the review embargo is lifted. Now, of course, I saw Eternals twice last week, and I was allowed to give a quick social media reaction. So I did my quick out of the theater, my 30-second out of the theater reaction to the film, whatever. And I thoroughly enjoyed this film. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I said at the time that I think I still prefer Shang-Chi, and after seeing it twice and having some time to think about it, I still prefer Shang-Chi. Shang-Chi is still my favorite comic book movie of the year. So there's that. Eternals, probably my second favorite comic book movie of the year. Let me answer your question, and then I'll go into a little bit more detail. Did Eternals live up to my expectations? Well, you have to understand before I answer that what my expectations were. Because my expectations were not small. My expectations were Best Picture contender. Maybe even Best Picture at the Academy Awards leading contender. You've got this rich background story. You've got the reigning Best Director at the Academy Awards with Chloe Zhao. I absolutely loved her last movie. Nomadland, I thought it was a work of absolute genius. I think that movie's a masterpiece. I've run out of words to describe how good I think Nomadland is. And then you had the Kevin Feige hyping it a bit, all that kind of stuff. So my expectations were, this is going to be a Best Picture frontrunner. Understanding that that's what my expectations were. Did Eternals live up to those Best Picture contender expectations? No, they didn't. They did not. I enjoy the movie. I think it's really good. I think it's a phenomenal film. I mean, what they were able to do with this film, it's a very different MCU film. It's packed with great new universe expanding mythology. It's really bold and a very good movie. I've seen it twice. I will probably see it at least 2 or 3 more times once it comes out in theaters. But did it live up to my Best Picture contending expectations? No. No, it did not. Do I think it's the best comic book movie of the year? No, I still give that to Shang-Chi. I really love that film, man. So let's talk about it for a second. Now, I'm going to let you know, I'm going to avoid any major spoilers. I'm not going to give away major plot points. I'm not going to give away major surprises here, but I am going to talk a bit about what the movie is about. So if you're somebody that you don't want to know the slightest detail of this movie, you might want to turn out. I'm not going to go into big spoilers, but I'm going to set up the movie for you, give you some idea about what it's generally about so I can give my commentary on it. So basically, my jaw was on the floor right from the opening shot of the movie, because I'll tell you what the opening shot is. It's a black screen with text that basically sets the stage. And the stage is this, and it's huge and has massive implications. It says the Celestials, particularly Arishem, and I hope I'm not mispronouncing his name. I think it's Arishem. I think that's how you pronounce this Celestial's name. The big giant red Celestial you see in the trailers. He is like the prime Celestial. That basically Arishem created our universe. He created our sun. He created the planets and all this kind of stuff. And Arishem is there. Now I've seen the movie twice and I've missed it both times. And a new Celestial is born like every million or billion years. I've seen it twice and I keep missing. Was that an M or a B? But at any rate. So the Celestials are these massive, important galactic interstellar beings that literally bring forth life into the universe. That is what these Celestials do. That's the type of scale we're talking about that this movie has. It basically introduces creation ideal into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which you've never really had. As a matter of fact, right at the beginning of the movie, it basically tells you these Celestials, Arishem has been around before the Infinity Stones even existed. Before the Infinity Stones even existed. Now, of course, he then creates the Eternals as well. And the idea is this. And this is all just set up right at the beginning of the movie. So Arishem wants life to thrive on planets, right? But there are these beings, these creatures known as the Deviants, which you see in the trailers. And they arrive on a planet and they threaten the life flourishing on that planet. So what Arishem does is he sends his Eternals, led by the Prime Eternal, Ajax, which is Salma Hayek. And he sends his Eternals to worlds to counteract the Deviants. But, as you see in the trailer, they have very specific instructions. They cannot interfere in the conflicts of humanity other than when deviants are involved. That's it. That's their main in Star Trek terms, that is their prime directive. They can't do anything other than when deviants are involved. Now, as the Eternals head to Earth and do their things, we see the first interactions between them, and we see Icarus, played by Rob Snow, of course, and we see Cersei, played by Gemma Chan, and we see in the trailers there's a love interest there, there's a romance, so there's a real family bond that the Eternals eventually begin to make with each other. They consider themselves a family. And through the centuries and thousands of years, that's what they've done. But now something has happened. There's something coming called the emergence that they talk about in the trailer. You hear them reference the emergence. Now, I'm not going to say what the emergence is. You guys will have to wait for that a little bit. So I'm not going to say what the emergence is. But there's this event now coming called the emergence that is, bringing Eternals and Deviants heading towards a big conflict again and a lot of other stuff. And there you have it. So when I start, and then it poses a big question. The movie poses a massive question that our heroes have to wrestle with. Should humanity be saved in light of, could there be a greater good? And I'm not going to say what that is, but I love this question in this movie because I love it when heroes are forced with morally compromising dilemmas that they have to face and struggle with. And even they're not 100% sure what the answers are. And even the Eternals themselves have disagreement over what's the right answer. And they work through all this together. And I love that. I love the complete expanding of the universe. Like when we talk about the Marvel Cinematic Universe, we're talking about New York City most of the time, or at least at the very minimum Earth. And to some degree, once, maybe we'll go to Titan, but this, with Arishem and the Celestials, it takes it to a whole nother level. A whole nother level. It expands the MCU to a degree that we never really would have thought possible. Yeah, we had Guardians of the Galaxy, and yes, we have Thanos, but you're now dealing with entities that created life in the universe. And that is a level of boldness that I don't think we have seen in the MCU so far, that I don't really think we've seen in comic book movies so far. I love the performances in this thing. Gemma Chan was great. Angelina Jolie is great. Salma Hayek is great. Oh my God. I love Kamehameha Gianni in this movie. Kamehameha Gianni in this movie is Kingo. I didn't know whether he could fit in this movie. I was like a lot of other people when they announced that Kamehameha Gianni was going to be in this film. I was like, really? Kamehameha Gianni? Okay. And I didn't really know what to think of it, even though I am a big fan of his. But I'm not saying he steals the movie. He doesn't steal the movie, but he steals every scene he's in. Like when he's in a scene, he just kind of steals the scene. The whole cast was fantastic. And one of the things that Chloe Zhao does really, really great in this movie is the interpersonal relationships and the different dynamic that each of the Eternals has with each other. Like, it's not just Angelina Jolie's relationship with Gilgamesh, But then she has a very different type of relationship with Ajax, and then a very different type of relationship with Cersei. And that plays out that you get all these Eternals, and each one of them have a very unique relationship with each of the others. And what you get sometimes in movies like this is that when you have these ensemble movies, character A has the exact same type of relationship with character B as they do with C, as they do with D, as they do with E, unless one of them's a romantic relationship, then that one's a little bit different. This one, the dynamics between every pairing of the Eternals is very unique. That's the way it is in real life. And I love the way they did it. Whenever the Eternals were just on screen, even talking to each other, I loved it. I thought the action in the film was fantastic. The action is great. There are a couple of complaints that I have about the movie, though, that take it from, this could be a contender for Best Picture, or this could be a contender for my favorite comic book movie of the year, and lands it very affirmatively behind movies like Shang-Chi, and we'll see what happens with Spider-Man No Way Home later on. Number one was the Deviants. I understand the role that the Deviants have to play in this movie. I do. And I'm not going to go into any spoilers here, so I'm going to have to stay pretty vague. But the way they used the Deviants, I thought was a bit of a waste, to be honest. And they even made a creative decision with the Deviants. At one point in the trailers, you see the one Deviant holding Angelina Jolie saying, "You can't save any of them." How they got to that point really didn't make much sense as far as from the Deviant point of view goes. And I'll just finish it off by saying, I thought the Deviants were kind of a wasted opportunity. Yeah, they served as really good cannon fodder for the Eternals to show off their badassness, but there were supposed to be more than that in this movie, and I think there was an opportunity for them to be more in this movie, and they even tried a little bit, but I feel like they dropped the ball on it, and that felt pretty unsatisfying. That felt pretty unsatisfying to me. So that was one of the major things to me. The second thing was, there's an overarching kind of problem presented with the Celestial, Arishem, that I can't talk about in any sort of detail. Although the way they end the movie with Arishem is very, very, I really like what they do with him at the end of the movie and all that kind of stuff. But again, no details, can't give any of that away at this point. So I thought the dialogue was great. By the way, Kit Harington is great in this movie. I love Kit Harington's character in this movie. Can I just say, love him. Absolutely love Kit Harington's character in this movie. Richard Madden as Icarus, fantastic. He's the dynamic. I'll bring up this image again, but the dynamic and the relationship between Icarus and Cersei was just so well done. Like, you could feel the roller coaster of emotions, and you felt for them and all this kind of stuff. And then you have Kit Harington in it. And by the way, they're both in the movie, so this is not a spoiler, but there's this scene where you have Richard Madden and Kit Harington, meeting face to face. And it's like, you could feel the energy in the audience both times I saw it. It's like, you got the Stark brothers there. Very cool, right? So that was kind of fun. At any rate, so this is a bold, ambitious, dense, extremely universe expanding movie that they went for here. And for the vast majority of the time, it really clicks and it really works. There are some drawbacks to the film, such as the Deviants were underused, and when they tried to do more ambitious things with the Deviants, and you'll see what I mean when you see the movie, I felt like they made some really questionable and, quite frankly, confusing decisions about what to do with the Deviants as they move forward. That kind of just left me shaking my head going, how does that make sense? Again, I can't go into details, but you'll see what I mean when you see it. That kind of hindered the film and made it slow down a lot for me. The individual Eternals were fantastic and great, but it still comes down to this. And I said this in my initial thoughts on Eternals. And that was, when I came out of it, I said, this is such a different kind of movie. Like the MCU does, and you've heard me say this before, the MCU does such a great job of mixing up their movies, so none of them are really alike. Like Ant-Man is more straight up comedy. Winter Soldier is like a 70s political thriller. Doctor Strange is something else completely different. Shang-Chi is very different, like a wushu movie that, as opposed to everything else. But at the end of the day, all of those very different movies still share and have that Marvel MCU DNA to it. They're very different films, but you still walk out feeling like I just saw an MCU film. And that's a good thing. You don't get that feeling with Eternals, in my opinion. It does not have the MCU DNA to it. And that leaves me wondering, I don't know how the average MCU movie fan is going to respond to this movie. Like, because to me, it's wonderful. Like, it really works. It's a thinking man's MCU movie. Not that the other ones aren't. I'm just saying, you know, it asks bigger questions. It gets more, not just metaphysical, but it gets more into the existential, like the existential questions that the characters are posed with and we as the audience are posed with. It's much more character-centered. And it's a different kind of movie. And I'll be honest with you, while I walked out having really enjoyed it, I simply don't know how the average MCU fan is going to respond to it. Like when I came out of Shang-Chi, I said very confidently, I think the vast majority of you guys are really going to have fun with this movie. And sure enough, you did, because that's what it was. It was like designed for that, and it delivers on that really great experience. This movie is designed to be something very different. And how people are going to respond to it, I just don't know. And even the critic ratings right now kind of reflect that. Like last night, I think Eternals was sitting at 70%. Today, it's jumped up to 2%, so it's gone up to 72. Maybe it'll go up a little higher. Maybe it'll be a little bit lower. And 72 is a great score for most movies, but we are accustomed to seeing higher scores for MCU films. 72 is great. But is it for a Marvel film? And I think that's a really good reflection of that. So whereas I came out and said to you guys, after seeing Shang-Chi, y'all are going to love this movie, super fun, blah, blah, blah. And sure enough, most of you did. I don't know how you're going to feel about Eternals. I think this is, again, one of the most different comic book movies, not just for the MCU, but one of the most different comic book movies ever made. And it's going to appeal to certain sensibilities and not to others. And yes, the post-credit scenes are fantastic, but I'm going to be very curious on the Sunday after Eternals opens for us to do our open spoiler discussion and really hear from you guys what you thought and what your experience was. Because this is going to be one of those more interesting Marvel films to see how people react to it. And I honestly don't know how people will. I know that I enjoyed it a lot. It's certainly, you know, a hell of a lot better than some of the other shite that Marvel has put out, you know, in terms of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. or the Inhumans or what have you, or that Hawkeye trailer. John, don't go to the Hawkeye trailer again. Okay, I won't open that can of worms. But for me, all I can do is speak for myself. I really, really did like this movie a lot. I really like this movie a lot, and really like this movie a lot. Not as much as Shang-Chi, won't be my favorite comic book movie of the year, but I think it's a bold step that's trying to expand the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I don't think it's going to work for everybody. But anyway, guys, those are my little bit more in-depth thoughts on Eternals. I cannot wait for you guys to see it and for me to hear your responses. I honestly think there's going to be a lot of you guys that think this is the greatest comic book movie ever made. And I also think there's going to be some of you guys that see it and think it might be one of the worst comic book movies ever made. It's that kind of film. So whatever you guys are thinking right now, jump on down to the comment section below and let me know your thoughts.